Welcome, everybody. We're very excited to have you here today. My name is Matt Baxter. I am the CEO of Wedge. We are a video interviewing platform, and obviously video is near and dear to our heart, but certainly we love talking about the conversation related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm hanging out with two amazing people in the space that we're going to get into in a second. But certainly I want to give a shout to Employ, who are our amazing partners in the HR tech space. So Employ has brands like Jazz HR, Lever, JobVite, Next RPO. So they can help service you in any size of your organization. And that's why we love partnering with them. We have been partnered with them for over 5 years, and they have been great to us. And they're servicing almost 20,000 organizations around the globe. So highly encourage you to reach out to them. There'll be a time halfway through that if you want to hear more about Wedge, hear more about the broader Employ brand, you certainly are going to be able to do that as well. But I think without further ado, let's get started and let's hear a little bit more about our guest speakers today. I'm definitely a thorn amongst roses with the two of you, so I'm excited to get the conversation related a lot more about you. But Jadey, do you mind getting us started? Tell us a little bit more who you are, where you come from, and we'll let Tameka roll from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this invitation, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Near and dear to my heart. So I actually have come from years of recruiting, have managed recruitment firms, grew into a size that was attractive for sale, have been in global organizations, also have worked for the Mom Project, which is a DE&I platform focused on women in the workforce. And have started my own consultancy. So my own recruiting consultancy, really looking to focus on organizations that are up to something, right? So those that are mission driven, those that are at some kind of inflection point where, hiring the right people really is going to make a crucial difference. And just a real student of people and work, and excited to be a part of this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. Tameka, excited to hear a little bit more about you too.
Absolutely. Happy day, everyone. And I'm saying day because I'm not sure how global this call is today. So some of us is Thursday.
Got some Eastern, some Pacific, some Chicago, some Houston. I think we're global, so it's great.
Yes. And I like to start off with putting happy in front because that's literally what I use to set my intentions for the day. I use it for Mondays as well, and people think that I'm a little crazy. They're like, how can Monday be happy? I'm like, it can be if you set the intention. So my name is Tameka McNair. I am super, super excited to be here today. DEI has a special place in my heart for many different reasons, including my own journey of navigating as an African-American female through 5 corporations, industries. So with those 5, it was different industries. And then I've done about 10 different discipline switches. And then with my North Star being wanting to become a CEO of a Fortune 100 company, that has also added another layer of just complexity and added an interesting fabric to my journey. Why am I here today? In my day job, I work at Microsoft, where I am on a team that's focused on the digital employee experience. One of the tools that fall under that bucket is Viva, which I absolutely love. But when I joined that team about almost a year and a half ago, what I realized is that although this was my first time being in the HR discipline, that at the heart, employee experience was who I am. So my background is actually in industrial engineering. I've done a ton of different things. And so now to make all those transitions that I made and then being over in a space where I'm intentional about thinking about the employee experience and DEI to help the organization move forward, it has been really rewarding. So I'm super excited about us digging in deep and talking about this amazing product that Matt has, and thinking about, right, how do we make sure that we add a DEI element to, quite frankly, everything that we do. So from there, Matt, I'll pass it back to you.
I love it. I love it. And The chat is moving very quick for the global reach for all the people that are on here. If it makes you guys feel better, my mother is on here, so I'll make sure not to swear, not to say anything inappropriate. So we'll keep it all good. So no, but seriously, thank you to the two of you joining this, and thank you for all the listeners tuning in as well. Employees, a great co-sponsor again, as I just want to allude to. So I think let's get into this. So one of the questions that we get faced with all the time is, so video in the corporate world is used as an efficiency tool, whether it's a video screening, video interviewing, conferencing, webinars, not just talking hiring, but video often is implemented in that space of efficiency. But with that, there comes some challenges of tech. There comes some challenges of people just feeling comfortable being on video. Not everybody has the San Francisco background like Tameka has as well too, but video, certainly can be a challenge in that space. And so how can we be thinking about video in general and also in the hiring process about making it a more accessible tool and create an accessible opportunity for candidates in the hiring space? Would love maybe Tameka, since I picked on Jadey to start off. Tameka, do you want to get us started? And Jadey, I want to hear your thoughts as well.
Absolutely. So before I start talking specifically about videoing, I'm going to take a step back and talk about when I think about implementing any change at an organization. It's very important that we think about a few key things at the beginning, and I like to call it the strategy work. And so in that bucket, pretty simple, right? Why are we making the change? What are the expected outcomes? And how are we measuring the outcomes, right? So those are very critical things that should be taken into place because it really will govern how you roll out the whatever tool you're rolling out, and then how you are monitoring it along the way. So now let's dig a little bit deeper into video in particular. When we think about video, we have to take some time and think about what are the personas of people who will be engaging with this tool. And if we lean into the D&I space, where a large amount of minorities tend to sit, we have to take time to think about what experiences have they lived, right? And I'm gonna be very honest and just transparent with you all today to just give some more color and insight on the other things that I'll suggest here shortly. So I remember this was probably about 10 years ago, so not too far away. And I was in the process of looking for a role to utilize my engineering degree. And I was working with a firm, and one of the suggestions that was made to me was for me to consider changing my name on the resume if I wanted people to consider me. And immediately what I said was, I refuse to change my name. And whatever corporation that I'm in or I choose to go to, if they can accept my name, then that's actually not the place that I need to be at. But from that experience, it really has caused me to pause and be intentional about how am I navigating, right? Because in some essence, what she was saying to me may have had some validity to it. When we think about some of the stereotypes and the biases that may go along, right? Whether it's intentional or not, because that's the thing about bias, right? We may not intentionally realize that it is there, but it also requires us to do a deep search and make sure that we are identifying where are our blind spots, where are places of bias, right? So if you go back to that 10 years so ago, and you look at Tameka then and you say, hey, what about you doing a video interview? Actually, I would be terrified, because if someone has already asked me to consider changing my name on my resume, what in earth would this do if they now actually get a face to it, right? And so I think that those are things that we really have to keep in mind when we're thinking about rolling out the video, right? Now, there are some huge benefits that I believe that can come with it being rolled out in a way where organizations also hold themselves accountable in every step of the journey, right? It could actually be a way to expand your reach, right? Going into areas where they were traditionally not tapped, right? But if we're going to take that approach, we need to think about, okay, what are those barriers of entry that we have to remove as an organization if we're going to target in such a way like that? Then we take another step and we think about, hey, as an organization, how does this impact our bottom line, our business, right? This could save us time when we think about the time from recruitment to hire. This could save also time for our recruiters in general, which means that we free them up to do additional things. So we have to be mindful of just all of these important pieces along the journey. One particular place I want to dig in a little bit deeper is, how are the hiring decisions made? If we're intending to bring video into the fold of things, we need to make sure that when we are actually hiring, that we can drive as much consistency as we possibly can. So maybe that looks like, hey, we're going to have these pool of candidates. We'll then get in a room together, 3 or 4 people or whatever you decide, and we make a decision together, right? That's one way. Another way could be, hey, let's actually listen to the video before watching the faces, make our decision, and then look at the faces, rewatch the video, right? Just to remove some of this unintentional biases that may surface. Also along that, we have to be very clear on, what are we hiring for, right? Like, do we have a clear list of criteria that we're going to use in a consistent way to hire for the need that we have? So I will pause there, Matt, because I know I touched a ton of things.
No, I mean, this is why this webinar should have been an 8-hour series and not just a 1 hour, because I mean, it's so true. I mean, certainly conversations we're hearing all the time. And I love your question related to who's actually making the hiring decisions. I mean, we get feedback from organizations that, you might have, chief human resource officer making the purchasing decision, but the hiring manager is actually making the decision, but the talent acquisition leader or the recruiter is actually reviewing. I mean, there's a whole, like, connecting the dots. And so I love that. So Jadey, I want to hear your thoughts. I know we're going to go back and forth on quite a bit of this, but Jadey, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you think and your own take as well.
Yeah. So, my gosh, first of all, Tameka, what great perspective. And I love the way that you started it out, right? Really thinking through, like, how has it been out there in the world? Like, what have these people experienced? And what kind of bias do the candidates have, frankly, about interviewing? What is their experience? And making sure that you're mitigating that. I think, video is one of those things. It's a tool, just like any tool. And it can be used for good and it can be used for evil, right? And most of the time, tools just get used for, your day-to-day, right? But you can really utilize it in a very positive manner. I think one of the things that's exciting for me about it, as I've had a chance to look behind the scenes of a number of organizations and their internal processes, I think that this is a real way that talent acquisition can be a real hero of the story and a real strategic player, because it's all going to come down to processes, right? And that deep thinking about, what it is that you're wanting to achieve within the organization. I think it's a huge opportunity. The benefits, obviously, for the candidates, because you get to include more people in the interview process. It reduces the barrier for them to be able to participate. They don't have to go to the kind of cost to, like, come in physically into an office. There's the speed of it all. There's a number of factors that can be positive for candidates. But where I see a real opportunity too, especially from the TA angle, is training and development of leaders and of hiring managers. Where the best of intentions of organizations around being an inclusive employer fall down is oftentimes at that hiring manager level. People don't leave jobs, they leave managers is the saying. And this gives talent acquisition an opportunity to really like almost in slow motion, bit by bit, kind of show, okay, this is the scorecarding. These are the skills that are needed for this role. Here are the things that we're evaluating on. Here's the process. This is how we're going to take a look at, and evaluate. Bringing additional people in. So it's not just one person making the rule in and rule out. Like, you can bring more people to the process earlier so that you're giving more individuals a shot at being moved forward in the process. And also being able to give feedback, auditing and giving feedback, right? If you're starting to see some trends, I think it's a great place that you can utilize data, right? You're going to be able to have a much wider swath of candidates coming in. So you are going to be able to start seeing some trends that you can, again, mitigate. I would also argue that this is a great opportunity to potentially pipeline talent, utilizing it as a tool of not just you're in or you're out, but an opportunity to capture, okay, well, maybe we're evaluating on these skill sets. Maybe they're not it for this role, but there may be additional roles that they could be considered for because they scored high on these characteristics. But again, a lot of it just comes down to, right, that intentionality, the strategy. And I think, it's a great opportunity for TA to lead.
Jadey, it kind of segues into the next question I want to ask. So you both know me well enough. My first business was mowing lawns, and then natural career transition is you go right into HR tech. I don't know if that makes me a sociopath or whatever it is, but not the most linear career transition. But I've fallen in love with it. But little did I know that almost every single day we're out there, talking to partners, talking to customers, the conversation related to bias and discrimination that pops up. And we want to be obviously an ally in this space, not just to our customers, but to candidates as well. That's the most important part about this. So in thinking through the conversation around, and Jadey, you sort of highlighted it, it's, video and other tools like applicant tracking systems and screening tools. They are tools, but how can you potentially leverage something like video and other screening tools to actually be in an inclusive platform or reduce bias opposed to sort of increasing or creating concerns? And Jadey, I'll have you start off this one, and then Tameka would love your thoughts afterwards. But I think, Jadey, you kind of teed this up in a great way anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, so here's the deal. If you're not intentional about it and you're just going to give the tool to the hiring manager and say, do what you do, right, you're going to get what you get. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's what's happening, right? I think, again, beyond just the skill sets that you're looking for, I think the other thing is that whether it's asynchronous video, right, or it's one-to-one video, regardless, it is a two-way street. So I think it's a huge opportunity for companies to be able to also showcase their employee values and to really show the tone and of inclusion. It's a great opportunity to include some information around the organization and what they're hoping to do longer term. I'd also say even the message, the medium is the message sometimes. So even being thoughtful about what kind of materials are they providing in advance? What kind of hints, tips, tricks, prepping the candidates in advance so that they win, giving them some thoughts around that. I'd also really suggest taking a look at, making sure that they understand that this is a valid process, right? Like giving some numbers, some stats, some percentages, some overview of what the organization is trying to do with build, oftentimes this may be utilized, especially if it's asynchronous, to do a quantity of hiring, right? To give kind of the hero story around that of like, what is the organization, we're hiring a number of positions, but why, right? And what is their role in all of this? So I just think thinking about it as that two-way street, as a way to be able to do the employer branding piece is really important. I'd say in terms of, mitigating, I think it's really important to make sure that you seed your panels well, that you think that through. I know that some organizations are already starting to use AI to analyze and do shortlist. I'd make sure to audit that like crazy, right? To make sure that, people's speech patterns, or there's, a number of elements that could maybe weed people out, have bias to it and weed people out, making sure that you have a human auditing that. I'd also make sure that you're consistently using it so that you aren't allowing one funnel for people that the hiring manager knows personally, and the rest of the population, so that everyone has a fair shot. And I'd also really consider which employee populations, which roles you're using this for and which you're not, and really thinking that through. I'm not saying it might not be the right answer to have certain certain skill sets go through this funnel, but really take a look at this. Are you only running through skill sets that are largely kind of lean towards kind of minority or women or what have you, right? And then letting other skill sets that could potentially benefit from going through this tool go through the normal channels. So I just think it's just deep reflection and thought. It isn't a magic button. There's no easy solve.
That's what we were talking about beforehand.
Right.
I mean,
There's
no
not.
push a button and fix this. I mean, the work, the effort, the energy, and obviously we hope that we've come a long way in the last decade from Tameka having to be recommended to remove her name. We hope a lot of change has been made, but there's still a lot of work to be done in this space. And that's why obviously we're excited to talk about it. So Jadey, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, that's okay. I needed to be cut off.
No, absolutely not.
But go ahead.
Tameka, want to hear your thoughts as well on this.
Absolutely. I will double down on many of the things that Jadey said. I'm going to take a quite slightly different angle associated with this question. And what I'm going to anchor us all to is the employee experience and the opportunity that we have to drive that from the time that a person has an interest into your organization and, quite frankly, until they leave your organization. So recently, I joined the Microsoft Alumni Board of Trustees, which put me in a situation where now I'm thinking about the experience from a total ecosystem perspective, right? And so it's caused me to pivot a little bit with how I thought, where historically people would talk about, hey, it's important for you to land the candidate, right? Get them to your corporation. And then when they get there, it depends, right? And then when they leave, all right, see you later. But what I realized is over the last couple of months is the importance of our intentionality on the experience that we're given from day 0 or -10, right? Before they even thought that, hey, Wedge is a place that, I want to come and utilize my talents, to when they leave. And I've actually recently been saying, hey, it's actually where we should double down is when actually people leave. Because when people leave your corporation, they are your brand ambassadors. And we want our brand ambassadors to say great things about us, even if our company is not the one that they chose. So now let's go back, right, and talk about this whole video and the approach that we can take. I think it's very important to be very intentional on the front end on what type of experience are you trying to drive. When I think about this particular tool or any video tool, right, the first thing that comes to mind to me is, what is the accessibility parameters or capabilities that we have? And the reason why that topic is so important to me, because I have a son who experienced a stroke at 6 weeks old. He will be entering adulthood next year, right? So he has some different accessibility challenges. So when it comes time for him to enter into the workplace, I don't want there to be any biases associated with that, right? So when we're thinking about implementation, we need to think about, well, who are actually the people who will be using this tool? Are we providing solutions, right, that wouldn't unintentionally exclude a group of people? I'll talk a little bit more because I mentor so many people, but I have a close friend who has Tourette's, right? And for her, interviewing is a daunting thing. We had a conversation and she literally told me, she said, I went through a set of interviews at one time. It was 5 back to back. And I literally thought that I was going to pass out afterwards. So when we start thinking about some of the fatigue that could go along with whatever, different ability that someone has, we have a responsibility to dig in deeper there, right? So for me, that's like, hey, okay, how can we get creative here? How can we use video to as a form of multiple different options to address the accessibility needs, right? Because this could be very good for someone like her who experiences that additional pressure when it comes time to interviewing, right? But then it also makes me think about, okay, what questions are we seeding to the individuals? How are we seeding the questions? Are we being clear on what the expectations are and how they were being measured? Are we equipping them, right? Maybe there's a YouTube video or something that we've created that will help them with utilizing the tool, right? So that's from that side. When I think about from a corporation side of the house, I think that is very important with whoever's rolling this particular tool out, that you have the right set of stakeholders at the table, okay? This is a tech tool, so we need to have, technology there. We also need to have legal in some aspects, right? Because we want to protect ourselves. And so there may be some additional verbiage that we want to put as a disclaimer underneath, right? When candidates are interviewing as a way of protection. Then we have HR at the table, right? And I think that we have to be intentional about making sure that we are meeting in a consistent basis to ensure that we drive the product through, right? That it's yielding the expected outcomes, going back to what I was saying at the beginning about, what the clear things we should do on the front end. So I will pause there, Matt.
No, I think first off, I love the idea of the multiple options. And I think that's, and creating circumstances allow for more inclusivity. It's one thing that we talk about is like, you think about the skill set. So remove video, remove Wedge, remove any of this altogether. Interviewing is a skill set, and there's a salesmanship or saleswomanship to that. And when you're putting people through the rigor, regardless of what your background is, that is challenging and that is very difficult. And sometimes an interview is totally unrelated to a job performance. And in fact, a lot of times it is. And so I think, certainly from creating an accessibility component, but also just thinking through a little bit more. We talked to a lot of organizations about thinking through a bit more of like what you're asking candidates to do through the interview process or the application process. Is it actually letting you know a little bit more about the job performance or what they're going to do in the job? Or is it just the typical interview process? I want to see if I like that person. And those are two vastly different things. And so I love your take on that. So thank you. That's great. So JD, actually, Tameka, I didn't even know you were going to share the story about the resume, and actually it relates perfectly. So we see a lot of organizations talking about, completely reducing all bias, and that's like removing names from the resume process. And in some circumstance, you can understand, obviously, the point of that. And there's a lot of research that suggests, negative outcomes for looking at names. And it's unfortunate that's the case. But at the same time, you're assuming people have the same ability to write effectively. Or I saw in one of the questions that people have resources to invest into a great resume or a great cover letter, where some people might not have that. And so, how can organizations be thinking about these different processes to actually attract and hire a diverse set of talent skill set, but also for people to not feel shameful about their name? Because, by the way, Tameka, I love your name, and somebody missed out on you. And so, but seriously, I really mean that to be true. How can we make that to be a more inclusive way and finding more diverse talent and finding more opportunities like that? So I guess I'll let either of you, I've gone back and forth. So whoever wants to take it first can start.
Well, I'll say just a little bit, and on that, first of all, I go back to the idea that there's no easy button, right? And we exist as humans with bias, like we just do, right? Like and I think we're not going to be able to have a perfect tool or a perfect solution. And I think the best that we can do is at least be aware of and try and mitigate. I also think, part of it is just is the intentionality to know what game it is that you're playing. Like, is your organization, do you have a business problem of not having a diverse enough, talent population in a particular area within your organization, right? Like, are there specific things that you're trying to do? And, therefore you being intentional. Tameka had mentioned, maybe going into different pools of talent. I even think, I think of it just almost like a math problem sometimes, of just like some A/B testing even. I think this video process can be a great resource for that kind of, like, let me, do my due diligence and go out and being able to speak to multiple different employee population, potential employee populations with more ease. So, like I said, it absolutely, there are some downfalls and pitfalls of, having the face, having the name, having the accent, having the background, right? You get a little sense of who I am and my experience from that. There's lots of information that can be taken in and used either against me or for me. We can't change that. But we can try and put in some processes and some thought processes to help make sure that, we don't have one point, like one hiring manager, for instance, using that as a negative. So I'll end there.
Okay. Matt, did you have something to say, or you want me to jump in? Okay. All right. I'll continue where JD left off and dig a little bit deeper into the importance of DEI being represented within the organization before we get to the point of even, talking about recruiting external talent. We should be looking at, are we living and modeling the values that we set forth? And if we are doing that, and DEI is important, it should be reflected in every phase of our hiring process. So when I think about, hey, who do we have in the room when it comes to hiring, it should be extremely diverse so that we minimize some of the biases that show up in the room, right? And if someone says no to someone, that people feel safe and comfortable to say, well, what was it, right? Give us more, right? And so I think that that is a very, very important piece of it. When we go back to, right, changing my name, right? For me, that's not an option. I do know people who have done that, but I refuse to do that. So then as an organization, it's like, okay, all right, we can remove names from resumes, right? But then what happens after that? We remove the name and then they see someone who face may not match what they think the resume says, right? So we still open up the door for biases. So for me, I think we just have to be very intentional about figuring out, how do we remove the biases from the hiring process all up, right? What are the ways can we lean into the marginalized communities? I think is also important, right? Maybe there are forums or Q&As where we're allowing people to come and ask questions and, have become at ease with some of their, fears or concerns that they may have around that process, because we can't negate the fact too that that may be a new experience for someone, especially when I think about the younger generations, right, who are entering into the workforce. This may be a new experience for them. So we also have a responsibility to equip them to know how to handle, the new type of interviewing style. So I will pause there.
I also wanted to add to that. I think you're absolutely right about, new employees, right? It's a great opportunity to add those teaching moments for them and giving them resources. And again, that just helps with the employer branding as well. But I also have to say, I think that this is particularly intimidating for older workers.
Hmm.
The younger workers, they're used to video by and large, right? That is becoming like their second language. My daughter, in fact, she's, is a high school senior, and that's her preferred method of communication.
It's all video.
All video all the time. So, and I think about it in terms of that, of, how, using these tools and technology to help support older workers as well, making sure that they have a good experience with it.
Yeah, and that's why also, I mean, it's a amazing point. I think both of you also brought it up. We, again, sorry. Can you hear me again? Sorry, I just connected. Yeah, quick hiccup with the microphone. But we see organizations talking about like the conversation related to collaboration as much as possible. So it's not just one individual reviewing information. And obviously, sometimes that's difficult when you think about live interviews, in-person interviews, but you certainly want to encourage collaboration as much as you possibly can to reduce that individual set of bias, or to reduce that one person, whether it's, they had a good day or a bad day when they're going through candidates. It's not just their own opinion.
Oh, you cut off.
Yep, sorry, we're back. Sorry, quick hiccup on that. But I think we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and Rob is going to launch a poll for us. And then there's a couple questions that came in from the Q&A that we'll dive in. So Tameka, JD, get a glass of water, whatever you need, but we'll get started in a second. So for folks tuning in, we certainly want to give a lot of love to our partners over at Employ. So we're happy to help in any way, shape, or form over at Wedge. If it's just a conversation related to this, connect you in any way, shape, or form, but also for folks interested in hearing a lot more about Employ and the broader Lever, Jazz HR, JobVite team. They're great over there, and they're happy to help as well. So if we can help in any way, answer questions, dive deeper in, and just have a conversation related to this, we want to be helpful in any way, shape, or form that we can. So all right, are you guys good to take a couple questions from the Q&A poll? So first one we kind of touched on a little bit, but I wouldn't mind if you guys doubled down. Greg, great question. One of them was, how would you recommend people change the way they pre-screen talent and assess skills to be more inclusive for candidates to access more opportunities? With current practices, candidates with more time and money have opportunity to interview, prep, resume building, career building. And so certainly, you don't want it to skew just because you have money means you got the job, but how can people be thinking through making that process more accessible on both sides? And I think that goes far beyond video. That's resumes, cover letters, applications. Would love your guys' take on that.
I'll kick us off, JD, and then I'll hand it to you. I think this goes back to organizations being intentional. And in this particular case, being intentional about their reach. I know a couple of organizations that I have worked for where they have actually overly pivoted on the more elite schools, right? And sometimes overlooking talent that sits other places like HBCUs in particular. For me, I did not attend a HBCU, but I did not attend a school that would necessarily be called elite as well, right? And so I think that with organizations, they have to be intentional about expanding their reach and looking for the underdog. I have a heart for the underdog because that was me. I've been looked over many times. And so I think that it starts with the hiring process, the values that organizations are putting around hiring, and quite frankly, the accountability point that happens, right? If we're saying that we're trying to meet a specific DEI number and we're using video, we should be holding ourselves accountable to the metrics that we've set out to and not make excuses about why something didn't happen, which is another value that I could see with the video tooling. It could actually allow for organization to move with agility. Right? If you have the data right in front of you and you're intentional about taking action upon that data, you can actually improve your business at the same time as you are bringing new candidates into your organization. I'll hand it to you, JD.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, I go back to the fact that it's a very complicated question, right? And so I wish I had like the top 10, things to do. I think that
Push a button, solve it in 5 minutes. That's
Push
our
a button.
expectations here. You were going to do that. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but I think Tameka's absolutely right. It's really, broadening the reach. And where I've found organizations, I'll give a quick example. So one of my clients right now is Kickstarter. They just hired a brand new CEO, Everett Taylor, who's just a visionary. He's like a 33-year-old, Black entrepreneur, and he is on fire. So they've been really intentional about the fact that they want to be an organization that is supportive of Black and brown and marginalized creators globally, right? And with that, they have to have individuals within the organization that also are, right, to be able to, really have that lived experience and to be supportive of that. So they have a very intentional effort to make sure that their reach is wide, which is why they've engaged me, right? Like, so that's like, sometimes having to go outside of what your comfort zone is, having to use additional resources to make sure that you are really have a targeted effort to widen that, right? I think it's really, really important, whether that you're using your own internal resources for that or an external resource. I think the other thing that ends up happening oftentimes is that you get referrals from your current employees, which are fantastic. However, you start getting, the people within their networks, and it's hard to pull away from that because, like that's how things have been done for the last 50 years. So it is that intentionality and really looking at it as a business problem with metrics and, just driving towards increasing the numbers.
Well, it's one of the other questions too that I wanted to fire by you guys was, are there any websites you'd recommend to obtain talent from various demographics? And I'm going to broaden that question a little bit, for folks that they don't know where to begin in this conversation related to DE&I, and they're maybe lost or trying to find a great way to get started. Like what is the best first step? What's the best, place that you guys would point to them? Obviously you guys have vast networks and day jobs, so you can't handle every question. But with that being said, if somebody who just wants to start asking questions around how to, encourage this in their organizations and make it a part of their culture, where do they start? Where do they begin?
For me, I would say, look at your numbers, like understand where you are, right? Like to get really gritty into, where are you? What percentages, where, and then from there, really benchmarking against, in the same kind of industry, how are you doing? I think sometimes we just assume that there's a problem, and maybe industry by industry, there isn't a strong problem there. Maybe there is, right? So I think just understanding your own numbers and your own intentionality around it is the first place to start before trying to go external to solve a problem you don't really have your arms around.
Yeah, I love it. Tameka?
And then to take it a step further from there, after you have done your internal search and resume and due diligence to figure out where the organization stands, I would suggest then just reaching out to your network. LinkedIn is a great place to do that, right? And people are open to talk about their journey and sharing whatever resources that they can about a particular area.
Sure.
Now, I know with Microsoft, we do have a DEI facing website. I'll find it. It'll at least be some information there around how Microsoft takes their approach with DEI. But I think that you just reaching out once you've identified what your real problem is after looking internally, reach out to people and people will get in the room and have conversations with you and figure out who else they may be able to connect you to as well to solve the challenges that you're having.
I love it. I love it. Thank you both for that. We're going to be closing down here in a couple minutes, but I do want to certainly give both of you space. I guess, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything else you guys would like to add? We'll answer for folks that put in some questions in the chat box. We'll follow up afterwards. But Tameka, Jadey, obviously, thank you for all the wisdom so far. But any closing thoughts you guys want to add?
I would just say, I think this is it. I think video like any tool, has a huge opportunity to make a major difference within organizations. I think it is the future of interviewing, and to how business is going to be done. So I'd say this is a great time to start experimenting with it at the very least. It will become the norm. Additionally, this is a great time for talent acquisition to lead, right? To be the heroes of the story. You're needed, your voice and your process is needed here. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, and thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Tameka, what do you got?
Absolutely. I just found the link. So I was doing a little multitasking. So
for anybody who wants to see what Tameka was just referencing, it's in the chat as well. Thank you for including that.
Let me make sure. Did I post it to the right people? If not, I'll make sure it's
We'll
posted
make sure everybody gets it. Yeah. We'll get it. Yep.
Awesome. So what I would like to just say to everyone is, with any new thing, it can be scary. And what I would say, embrace that, right? You can't transform being in a comfortable place, right? And just know that you're going to have to give yourself grace along the journey of implementing video and, quite frankly, anything else, right? Give yourself room to grow and evolve. The important thing is when you realize that there's area of opportunity to grow, that you actually take action upon that. So I just want to make sure that I leave you all with that, right? I think that video has some huge advantages, right, with reaching a broader group of people, but we just need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that exemplify our values, that drives fairness and drives DEI across the board. I am happy to help in any way that I can. I truly appreciate this time with you all, and thank you, Matt, for allowing us to come here and share some of our experiences.
As I mentioned, I'm a thorn amongst roses with the two of you, and this seriously has been awesome. And for folks, we have this as a recording, so happy to pass this along too, and we'll make sure to appropriately share contact information for folks that want to reach out to Wedge, to Employ, to Jadey, to Tameka as well. But seriously, thank you everyone for tuning into this. We'll make sure we distribute this appropriately, and this has been fantastic. And feel free to reach out if we can help in any way. Thanks, everybody.